Join us in a festival that promises to be extraordinary, because Bali is extraordinary.
Right, of thinking of audience even, which I know is at least when I was at university, I was always told you must think of an audience. And as an academic, I would always very strictly think of audience when I was writing something. But when I wrote this book, I just wanted to follow that feeling, follow the characters that I was with and follow the story. So that's perhaps why it's perhaps difficult to classify this book according to a strict genre boundary.
I think we've just got Ayu in. Yes? Ayu, can you hear us?
Yeah, Krishna, how are you? Hi,
hello.
Rebecca.
We have lost you again, but while we are getting you in, I might introduce you. There she is. You are here.
Yeah.
Yay.
Hello, Rebecca. Hello, Krishna.
I still can't hear you very well. I don't know if the audience can. Perhaps we can hear you now. You can hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
You are very faint. Can you hear her? No. So the audience still can't hear you. But while they're getting your sound in, I'm going to introduce Ayu Utami. Ayu Utami is probably Indonesia's most famous woman novelist, and the only male, there would be only one or two other male novelists or novelists of any gender who would be better known than her in Indonesia. I made a joke earlier on. I made a little bit of a joke earlier on to say that you're one of the few world famous novelists whom I knew before you became a novelist. And now I'll introduce you more formally, and that is to say, Ayu has written nearly a dozen books. Many of them are translated into English. Her most recent work, from which she will read a little bit later, is an autobiographical work, which sadly I have not read yet. But I have been following your career for a very long time. Ayu Utami is much awarded. She's known in Indonesia as somebody who pretty much invented a genre. There wasn't a genre of Indonesian literature which brought together sex and politics in this kind of a unique way. And in the process of inventing the genre, she set in motion a whole literary movement that then bred a generation of young women writers. So Ayu Utami cannot be captured either within the limits of a national literature or within the limits of a genre. And it seems like we're having great difficulty capturing her online.
I don't know. I can hear you very clearly, actually, but I don't know whether I can be heard.
No.
I see me bloating there in the picture.
We can hear you now. We can't see you. So if you did hear my introduction, Ayu, I said that you cannot be captured within the limits of either a genre or even indeed within the limits of nationally defined literature. It's a great pity that we have not been able to see you in Perth before this time, as you're a veteran of many global literary festivals. And it does seem we have lost you again. But if you can hear me, perhaps you might want to comment on the ways in which mythology and fable intrude on your writing, because your writing is, of course, about real life, about real politics, about real sex, but it also draws on mythology and fables. Can you talk about that now?
Well, I don't know whether you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Because I could hear you. And I can hear you, both of you, very clearly. Yeah, thank you for your introduction. It was actually the situation changed already in Indonesia. We have a lot of writers, women writers, male writers, or both different genders.
Yes.
But okay, I'll try to answer questions about this topic. Why I use myth and fables in my writing, yeah. But I think the dichotomy between myth and reality is a modern concept. And it doesn't mean that we believe in it. We don't believe in the dichotomy. When we are reasoning, we will say that myth is not reality, but we don't use and we don't have to use our reason 24 hours a day, because we live with beliefs, we live with myths. And I love myths and fables. I think it comes during my childhood without I am realizing it, yeah. Myths and fables always comes with dark, with night, with shadows, with dusk, not in the negative sense. But I think in the dark, our imagination becomes alive. When I was little,
recording in progress.
When I was little in Indonesia, electricity blackouts were very often. And as long as my mother was around, I love a blackout. Because we usually light candles, and she started to play hand shadow with me, and we will sing Japanese song, and mostly song about these animals, deers, and birds, and she tells me stories about the animal kingdom. And I think that's the way we started to love I started to love the fable through my mother. But my mother was a rational and a religious person, so she didn't tell me ghost stories. She didn't share with me monsters or phantoms. So she only tells good moral stories, good stories with morals, or sometimes just nice stories about animals, no monsters, no devils. But yeah. I have two aunts who lived with us at that time, and they love ghost stories. And from them I know different kinds of spirits and ghosts of Java, like the gendruwo, the wewe gombel, kuntilanak, all you name it. And I love to be scared, and I love to be bewitched. So I kept coming to their room, to my aunt's room, to listen tales of ghosts and fairies. That's the way I have beautiful memories of fable and myth, and I'm not against them. They enriched my life. They are not superstition. They are not irrationality. They are beautiful imaginations, as long as you are not trapped in it.
So you sometimes talk about a particular kind of spiritualism, which, it doesn't have so much, I haven't seen so much discussion of it outside of Indonesia. So this kind of idea of critical spiritualism, what does it mean, and how does it kind of invade your writing?
It has something to do with the context of Indonesia. You know that I started to write in the end of the military regime era, yeah. And I wrote my two first books, Saman and Larung, with the context of the military regime. And at that time, the military used their own myths to legitimate their power. Yeah, they're stigmatized the communist party and especially the women activists, women organization affiliated to the Communist Party, the Gerwani. They create myths. They create the communists as devils of the Indonesian history. But then, so it's another kind of myth, yeah. It's not the myth that I know when I was a kid, but it's a myth that trapped you. But then political situation changed. Like in 1998 or say in 2000, we started to have democracy. Indonesia started to become a democratic country. But it is in the democratic period of Indonesia that we started to see the increase of religious hatred, religious intolerance, terrorism, and Indonesia that used to be known as a society that is very tolerant started to change. And that's a question because for me it is an irony. It's a paradox that it is within democracy we started to see this kind of things. And I realized that at that time, I think I realized that this Indonesian tolerance used to be supported by myth. Yeah, not by reasoning, but by feeling what we call rasa, and it is developed through stories like myth. And it started to be we see and at the same time also we see ecological devastation, massive ecological devastation in Indonesia and also in the world, I think. But especially in Indonesia, I want to say that this religious hatred, religious intolerance, and ecological devastation is still conducted in the name of reason and religion, in the name of modernity and monotheism. So the old wisdom of rasa, the old wisdom of myth is being undermined by this modernity and monotheism. So yeah, so that's I think what I want to develop is that we used to have this kind of spirituality supported by myth, but this kind of spirituality cannot stay as the original form, because we have to face with reasoning, with critical thinking. So I think the only way to deal with it is by mixing it together.
That's very interesting that you use the word rasa in that way, because a little while ago I asked Rebecca where her stories start, whether they start with a genre or a story or or something else, and she said it starts with her feeling. And of course, the meaning of the word rasa is feeling. So I want to ask you the same question, Ayu. Where do your novels start? Do you start thinking about a genre? Do you start thinking about a message? Or is it some other process?
I think nearly all writers don't start with forms, yeah, with genre. It has to start with like spontaneity. And I like to use the Indonesian word rasa, which comes from the Sanskrit, but it developed, and this is my research now. Yeah, the word rasa is developed in Java in a different way that it is in India. In Java, it is developed in certain in a special, in a certain ways, in a particular ways, that it becomes a word for all the a kind of knowledge or awareness, starting from the very superficial to the very deep or very spiritual. So if we see this word, this concept, the Javanese rasa, we don't dichotomize reason and emotion. Reason is only part of the development of the rasa, but it is not dichotomized. So if I'm asked when how I started to write, it's always through my experience, my emotion, my intuition. So writing is actually like it started without forms. It started with like energy, and by writing we found the form. We make it form.
So Ayu, we'll have to talk more about rasa online, because in Sanskrit the word rasa means all kinds of things. It also means taste. It also means juice. So yeah, so you're onto something really big there, both of you, I think, starting with this thing that we don't really have a word for in English, but we seem to do in Javanese and Sanskrit. Now, I was going to ask both of you to read something while the audience is thinking about questions to ask you. So if you have any questions, there'll be a roving microphone, and we'll keep talking until you have captured a microphone. So first of all, are you still there? I don't want to lose her. So perhaps we ask Ayu to do the reading first.
Okay, I'm still here.
Okay, do you want to do a little reading for us?
Yeah, thank you. I will read from my autobiography called The Confession of A. This is part of me describing the place I was born and grew up. The island is called the land of Java, which means spirits still live on there. The unseen guardians of the island often reside in ancient weapons, jagged kris daggers, spears, and other weapons of war that are kept in secret places, old castles and sacred gardens. To rule, you must make a pact with them. To seal the deal, you need a blood sacrifice. One day, not long after the general came to power, as befitting a newly appointed ruler, he threw a party for the people. You may imagine festive fireworks in the night sky behind the palace. During the day, there was to be free food for the people in the great gardens. Tables would be spread, red and white rice, all sorts of dishes and snacks, local favorite as chendol or as Shanghai, bowl of sweet desserts, and all sorts of yummy drinks with milk or coconut cream would be spread upon them. Anyone could help themselves. The poorest of the poor were invited, and of course it was the hungriest who would come. Those who weren't so hungry would be a bit wary of fighting over food with the poor. The poor came in hordes, old and young. They came through the gateway opened gratis, no ticket necessary, and headed to the center of the great gardens where the tables were spread. They started to eat all the food offered like wild animals. Then, when a few of them began to feel full, while most were still fighting over food, something bizarre happened. The first sign was this. Mist appeared in few locations as if the spirit world was seeping in. From the entry points, fingers of thin mist spread, webbled like frogs' feet before thickening. The people were too engrossed by the food to realize the horror to follow. The gates clanged shut by an unknown wind. Those who were inside could not escape. Then a heavy rain fell from the sky. Yes, only from the sky above the garden. Outside the garden, all was calm and normal. But inside the garden, a typhoon twisted around, as if it had broken out from within the ground, forcing its way to the dark sky. Some giant trees groaned, shivered, then were pulled from the ground by a scary force, their roots like surprised veins. The people screamed, but they were too full to run, and their gluttony were too great to realize what was happening. The road was wrapped in mist. Trees fell upon tables and people. Some died instantly. Hands and feet stretched out from beneath the giant black branches. Someone claimed they saw dozens of kris, spears, and various weapons flying in the wind, appearing out of the ground to fly into the rumbling sky. Outside the garden, all was calm and normal. There was no rain, there was no noisy wind. The people walking in front of the palace looked on, entranced by the pretty eyes of the spotted deer. That's the story of how the general banished the spirits who supported the previous ruler. Every achievement demands a sacrifice, and this happened at the time I was born. So this is the story that I heard from someone who helped in our house. So it's what they believe.
And it's the kind of mythological beginning of Ayu.
It's a kind of Ayu and of the military regime.
Yeah. And in your book called Maya, you have also connected the publication of your book with the fall of the Suharto regime, which we will have to discuss at another time. Rebecca.
All right. The reading I'm going to, since we're talking magic, I thought I'd take you to one of the histories in the book with the magic. This is one at the end. It's in Victorian London, and it revolves around a man who works at the British Museum. The History of Mischief, the magic book, has been stolen from him. He's just realised he's about to lose the person that he loves most in the world, and he is upset about it. And so he's basically decided to leave the house and go out into complete frost. London is gripped by frost. The only thing that he's kind of comforting him is a book that he stole from the British Museum, which is called Frostiana. This is a real book that was printed on the frozen River Thames in 1814. If you look it up, you can actually find it. So Archie, our character, is just about to leave the house and do a bit of magic. I left the house, frost be damned. I didn't want to be there in the warmth among the champagne toast. I'd lost my job, my mischief, and my will. I walked past birds fallen out of the sky, frozen by the winter. Some were frosted hard to windowsills. I picked one up, a sparrow, and held it to my chest. I warmed it in the same manner I commanded ice to evaporate the day my thief came into my life. The little creature softened, twitched. I felt the warmth fill its cotton thread-like veins. I heard its heart beating, fluttering like a butterfly's wings. Its body twitched with more ferocity. Now awake, it desired to be free. I couldn't let it go. It would freeze again without me. The sparrow tried to flap its wings. I clamped them down and held it closer to my chest. I wondered if the bird heard my heart beating, if its ears would burst at the drum-like cacophony of a heart that was no doubt bigger than its whole body. I found myself by the Thames, that star of Frostiana. Its current was surely the only thing still moving with ease in London. I thought of the printing press that fashioned the book I swapped for the history. Maybe the press had nestled in the spot where the Tower Bridge now stood. Perhaps it faced St. Paul's as men around it walked on water. I thought of Will. The little sparrow chirped. It looked up at me, frantic. What was better, freedom and a certain death by freezing, or captivity and warmth? I thought of crushing it, killing it quickly. Perhaps a small cruelty was the kindest thing. It chirped again, begging mercy, perhaps. I let the sparrow go, held my hands out to the sky, that grandiose dome, and it flew away. I bent down, pulled my hand free of its glove, and let my fingers hover just above the Thames. I felt the chill coming off the river. I sank into myself, sent my mind into the water. I saw the billions upon billions of atoms beneath my hand, remembered pictures of water molecules from stolen books, the way the hydrogen atoms bonded, locking the liquid state into that of a solid. How funny that the first book Will ever caught me stealing was the one I remembered now, A Little Thing on the States of Matter. The memory triggered the mischief. The water below my fingertips froze. The river pushed up against the patch of ice, but I willed it deeper. I could see right down to the atoms. I danced along each bubble of oxygen. Snap froze those hydrogen bonds in place. It crackled as the ice hardened. I stretched my fingers apart and watched the ice spread. I had a sizable platform now and took the step of a man more mischievous than wise. The ice was solid, at least 12 inches. I threw off my other glove, holding out both hands. I froze the ice deeper, extending it into the Thames. I walked forward, watching the river turn solid before me. The ice was dark but smooth. The tides yielded, did not dent or push against the surface. I became cocky, walking faster, and then broke into a run, my feet outpacing the ice. As my shoe hit the water, I froze it. I jumped and ran over the river, freezing it before my feet came down. The ice hit the south bank. I turned like a skater, letting my shoes act as blades. I sent the ice outward, touching the Tower Bridge, extending past London Bridge. I poured my memories into the water, froze it solid as if to keep my past alive. There was no water to be seen. The ice extended far beyond my eyes. I stood in the middle of the frozen Thames where once men had drowned. I looked towards the tower, to the arches of London Bridge and the dome of St. Paul's. The power of the mischief still poured out of me. Newspapers would later report the glass shattered in all the houses around the river as water on dining tables and wine in cellars expanded. I shivered. It was cold. Very cold, actually. A horrible realization dawned on me. I, too, was made of water. The cold slithered through my veins like some nasty eel, entering my hands and feet and gripping my heart. I looked at the water in my eye. I looked up as the water in my eyes froze them open and saw, if my mind wasn't playing tricks on me, the speck that was my sparrow. As my last breath froze, the water vapour turning to ice crystals in my throat. I felt such joy that its tenacious flight should be the last thing I saw. Let there be celebrations upon the stage of my death. Will would have his frost fair after all. Thank you.
So has anybody got the microphone? Any questions? You're still thinking about questions? Well, in that case, put your hand up whenever you want to. But if Ayu is still online, perhaps I could ask both Ayu and Rebecca a question about language. So starting with you, Ayu, because most of your work will be known to this audience in English translation. And of course, you are a voracious reader in many languages. And I'm just wondering what this process of translation does. You know, how do you take an idea from another language and put it into Indonesian, even from Javanese into Indonesian or from English into Indonesian? How from your point of view, do ideas travel between languages? What is good about that travel and what's lost in the travel?
It's a very interesting question because I never think Japanese language as a different language from Indonesia, so we just mixed. But I think, basically, Japanese and Indonesian language we mix because it's more natural for us. But when we started to learn other languages like English or other European languages, or probably some other people started to learn Japanese or Chinese, I think what is interesting is not only to absorb words, but also knowing that syntax, the we sometimes words cannot travel by itself, but because it comes with the whole structure. And what is difficult is to translate, sometimes to translate the structure. So I realized, I don't know if I can give as example, Krishna, but sometimes this English language, it's already sometimes, I don't know how to tell it, but I started to understand that there are many expressions in Indonesian which is understood by Indonesian and is not understood by foreigners because it's very implicit. You cannot just say it like that because when it is translated to other language, it becomes a bit nonsensical because actually the grammatic is not really accurate. It's not really sharp.
Yeah. I'll just look around and see if there is another question. There are two people with hands up. Yes, please.
Oh no, she's saying 2 minutes left.
Oh, 2 minutes. Has anybody got a question? Not yet? Okay. Well.
Thank you. I have a quick question for Rebecca about the writing process. You're setting your novel in a few different places around the world, and I was wondering if you've travelled to all these places or what your experience is like with research.
I've travelled to many of them. So I've been to like Poland, Ethiopia, England. I lived in England for a while. I've been to Paris. These are some of the settings. Augusta and Margaret River are big places as well. A lot of the process of researching it is yes, the experience of going there and sometimes even visiting a place is where like the Polish story, for instance, which is set in a medieval salt mine, happened because I went to an academic conference in Krakow and discovered this salt mine, and just fell in love. And I'm like, there's mischief here. I have to write a story about this place. A lot of it also comes from what I care about. So the Ethiopian story, there's an Ethiopian story, comes from my husband, who's Ethiopian, and a lot of the work that he does about, we were talking about language before, and about the politics of who gets to narrate the stories we have, particularly about Africa. So a lot of my interest in these places they're always places that I love. They're places that needed to link in with the end of the story. And they're also places that mean something to me personally. So the selection of each place was very deliberate in how it comes to the mystery at the end. But at the same time, I was able to work some things in with stuff I just wanted to tell and things I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I think we're getting the countdown. It's been lovely to talk to Ayu and to Rebecca in front of all of you. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much to Ayu for making an appearance, and thank you, Rebecca, with your first Fogarty Award-winning book. And please read all their books. They're wonderful writers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.